Corporate actions could scarcely be more important. They're the means by which companies transfer value to their shareholders. Yet the means by which they do that is through extended chains of intermediaries. Each of the links in that chain introduces a risk of an error, an omission, a mistranslation, a misstep, a mistake. Everybody agrees that corporate actions data, corporate actions processing is a mess. But how much does it actually matter? Could the risks be eliminated? I asked everybody involved in the corporate actions processing chain, issuers, exchanges, CSDs, custodians, data vendors, technologists, investor relations experts, how much they think corporate actions efficiency actually matters.
It matters because simple errors in corporate announcements and unverifiable actions have very wide-reaching consequences. It can have impact on market capitalisation, and it can also be detrimental to investor confidence and shareholder confidence. It's incredibly important. I can give an experience I had 3 or 4 years ago where it's a company I was acting for, and we had an announcement going out in the early hours, and there was just one word that, in hindsight, having carefully reflected, we knew needed to come out. But meanwhile, that had a major impact because we were not able to do anything about it, and the share price fell very swiftly from £15 to £3 the next day of trading. So the impact is massive.
Well, I think the first point to remember is the role of the investor relations team at companies who issue the shares and bonds. They're responsible for ensuring that announcements of dividends, such as pay and ex-dates, for example, as well as rights issues, bonus issues, scrip and other corporate actions, reach all share and debt holders efficiently. Good communications is, after all, essential to the art of investor relations, which in its turn is all about ensuring that your company is correctly valued.
Exchanges that tend to be the first stop for issuers to submit their corporate announcements tend to invest a great deal of effort and time to ensure that the data is transmitted in a smooth fashion downstream. Being a market infrastructure, and since the process is manual, the error rate of data is also a concern to us. However, at SGX, we have implemented an issuer-to-investor initiative, and that is supposed to address straight-through processing all the way from issuer to investor.
The corporate action processing is the most complex task of the post-trade environment. Why does it matter? Why does it matter so much to everybody? But simply because it comprises very high risk, financial, operational and reputational. And in fact, this risk relate to everybody. I mean issuers, investors and providers.
Well, data vendors are in the business of aggregating data from multiple sources and then adding value. Here at Interactive Data, we invest a significant amount of resource ensuring the best possible data representation of corporate actions for our clients. That said, we'd much rather expend that resource ensuring the best possible client experience through continued use of ISO 15082 and data standards.
The simplest of errors in corporate action announcements or unverifiable actions can have enormous effects on the market capitalisation of a company, and in the downstream operational processes cause millions of dollars in losses. As long as the corporate actions information is not provided by issuers or exchanges in some standardised form, and the rules continue to be different from one market to the next, we're very reliant upon the best endeavours of data vendors and other information providers to keep us up to date with the changes in the details of those events. And this puts limits on what can be done to automate that processing.
It matters because corporate action processes are complex and risky. And as long as we have manual processes, there is a risk for the issuer, for all the intermediaries along the chain with the custodian and brokers, and ultimately for the final investors. And as long as we have all this risk, there is always the possibility for the issuer not to be able to collect the capital they wanted and to carry out the reorganizations or distribution that they were planning to do.
The costs and risks do not just fall on issuers. Erroneous transactions add $300 million to processing costs. Extra staff, data scrubbing, additional data purchases, software applications, they add another $1 billion to that figure. So that is $1.3 billion just in extra annual processing costs alone. Then there are the risks to take into account as well. Adverse market movements, $6.5 billion. Incorrect stock market prices, $350 billion. Companies are putting a lot of effort into their corporate actions, but the way we turn corporate actions into data for processing means they're at risk of not achieving their goals. Why is corporate actions data of such poor quality?
To make sure that all this news reaches investors, companies must use a regulatory news service. However, the subsequent distribution through the notable news agencies such as Reuters, Bloomberg and others may simply be in the form of text news items. This means that somebody, probably manually, is going to have to process it. And this in turn will potentially introduce errors and even omissions, goodness.
Because of the length of the chain, because of the complexity of the information that needs to be carried along the chain. So you have the issuer agent, the complexity for the custodians to often translate the information to another language for the final investor to be able to understand and exercise the rights. So as long as we have a reinterpretation of the same information along the chain, you have a risk for the information not to be correct and to get to the final investor completely different from when the issue issued it.
Structured ISO standards are readily available for corporate actions, but not used near as widely as they could be because not everybody is on SWIFT, least of all the issuers.
Standards exist, but they're not being used. Must that always be the case?
I'd say not always, because if we look back into history, we can see, for example, that the ISIN code was mandated by a number of national numbering agencies. And they had a huge impact back in the day of improving accuracy. More recently, the XBRL committee, as another example, has agreed XML codes for blocks of financial reporting. And many countries, including the UK and the US, have mandated their use. If there is to be a new standard in corporate actions, and it is to succeed, an obvious first step is for it to be mandated by the FCA and other regulators.
There are increasing demands on corporate treasurers to come up with more and more creative, more inventive ways to fund their company's activities. And they have investment banking advisors behind them who are equally inventive in creating complex formats for them. That, coupled with the lack of understanding of some of the operational processes that underpin that activity, or any real proximity to the downstream impacts and effects of them, are what cause a lot of the problems.
Is it fair to blame companies, their advisors, for being indifferent to what happens to the information after they publish it?
No, I don't think so, because essentially they're following the rules, and that is the key. It's obviously in the interest of companies for this data to be as widespread as possible. And I'm quite sure that if a suitable method of presenting the data was to emerge, companies would adopt it and follow it.
Lack of standards, lack of automation, lots of manual processing, but a clear appetite for change. How can we satisfy that appetite? How can we solve the problem of inefficiency in corporate actions?
Okay, so in an ideal world, regulators would just tell issuers to provide their information in prescribed ISO and XBRL formats, with a CODAL blockchain type technique to verify source accuracy. This is because when information is published, it's beyond the issuer's control and there's no way to interact with them to establish source accuracy. Currently, data vendors and custodians don't have this type of quality data. Regulation won't work in this case because this is a global problem and there's no way to get local regulators to act in concert. The industry has to solve this problem itself.
I agree, regulators are very limited. There's a lot the industry can do to deal with the problem, though. Issuers can begin to announce using a standardized format, and custodians and exchanges can adopt ISO 20022 and provide conversion services for those that have not yet adopted 20022 and are still on ISO 15022.
Introducing a standard which allows for automated processing of this text by the investment accounting systems maintained, for example, by custodians on behalf of their institutional investor clients helps ensure successful trades, proper allocation of dividends, and it also allows them to take advantages of opportunities for capital increases.
How can the problem be fixed? But the evident answer for me is the automation, but clever automation. I mean the automation where we would use the international formats, international standards, because we are closely connected to the international environments. So for our project at NSD, the corporate action processing, we have decided to use the 20022 ISO formats, but of course we still allow our participants to use for the SWIFT messaging the 15022 messages. All this allows us to eliminate a lot of paper, to reduce the time for the processing, and to make the process cost efficient, which means that the end investors, and in particular the foreign investors, they will be able to take the right decision at the right time and at the right price.
The nirvana of every corporate action professional is to have the golden source, which means the ability for the issuer to enter the information directly in the corporate action system as source, and that information being standardized along the chain to the final investors, so that we got high quality information that transit through the different chain in a fast matter, and give the ability to the final investor to actually receive the same information that the issuer has entered in the system.
In the context of SGX, I believe we have already solved this problem. In order to reduce error rate, cost of processing, as well as to improve efficiency of this process, we have offered to our issuers an online submission form portal from which they can actually submit their announcement in a structured fashion. We are then able to transmit this information in structured data formats using ISO 15022 and 20022 standards downstream to our data vendors as well as the asset servicing firms.
The bank's corporate actions software makes use of SWIFT messages in ISO 20022 standard formats, but that doesn't eliminate entirely the risk that incorrect information may be couched in the correct message format. I think one way to address this is that we need to get issuers more involved in the process and bring corporate treasurers to the table. It's hugely important that issuers in particular play their part in solving this problem, because after all they're the ultimate source of where this data and the corporate action event information is coming from.
The problem can be fixed by capturing corporate actions data when it's announced accurately, and then tracking that accuracy throughout the life cycle of the corporate action through data vendors, exchanges, and custodians.
Capturing accurate data and ensuring it remains accurate throughout the life cycle of a corporate action. It sounds simple, it sounds straightforward, but is it? James Orab of Codalmark thinks he has the answer.
So, we're building Instant Actions, an industry utility that collects corporate actions globally direct from issuers. We apply state-of-the-art cryptographic digital notarization to the data and data elements, rather like blockchain. This makes the information verifiably source accurate by parties later on in the information stream, for example when it's processed and an election made. IA distributes the information in ISO standard formats, 15022, 20022, even XBRL if you want, and the verification API we give downstream participants checks for accuracy at every point where a message is received, but most importantly if there's been an update, so there's no risk of acting on unreliable or out-of-date information. This offers the real opportunity for automated processing, an industry standard holy grail. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Here's how it actually works.
Issuers publish corporate actions to stock exchanges, but they also publish them simultaneously in ISO 15022, ISO 20022, or XBRL, or indeed all three, to the Instant Actions cloud-based corporate actions data registry. At the same time, issuers or exchanges, or both, send a truncated version of the corporate action information, a digital fingerprint, to use the technical term, to Codel. The global custodians will continue to receive corporate actions information from their usual sources, stock exchanges, data vendors, sub-custodians. but with one important difference. In the new and more efficient world promised by instant actions, the information global custodians receive is verified as source accurate by Codel. Because issuers do sometimes change their minds, Codel even tells the usual sources if the corporate actions information has been updated at any point by the issuer.
The real question is, will this work? The answer is yes. We ran a proof of concept exercise with Swift's InnoTribe to prove the viability of this solution. However, the critical problem is the need for issuers to become involved, because after all, they are the ultimate source of corporate actions announcements.
The tech vendors that work with Swift, which adopt this technology on behalf of their clients, have the potential to deliver amazing results. We're not even asking them to do anything startlingly new. Tech vendors working with Swift to drive change in the industry is a proven model of successful collaboration in solving industry problems.
So there is a solution. The experts agree the solution is viable. The custodians and the technologists believe they can make the solution work. But being workable is not enough. In business, investments have to deliver a return. So who are the beneficiaries of a more efficient corporate actions process? What are the benefits of a more efficient corporate actions process?
Gosh, they're quite widespread. One of them would be the ability to tidy up the archive, the trail of announcements that are out there, that are always out there for the public to refer to. So that just tidies up, puts the record straight, if you like. It's good housekeeping. Another positive opportunity, particularly for a company that has multiple listings across the globe, is that it gives the opportunity to align and tidy up and make sure you're not having a distorted view of the message. For example, with a translation, it could be that the corporate objectives of the business are lost and diluted along the trail, and then the company gets unfairly measured against a distorted view of those objectives. So this is a way of making sure you've got certainty throughout, and none of that corporate messaging is lost. So that's a very key one.
Anything that makes the job of the investor relations person more easy and makes communication with their investors more accurate and more efficient has got to be a good thing. Anything that makes the process by which investors can place an accurate valuation on the company's shares has got to be a really good thing.
In fact, ISO 15082 has proven to be a fantastic step forward in terms of achieving increased transparency and consistency in the corporate actions space. If the corporate actions industry is to move forward, however, reducing cost and risk, it's high time that situation changed.
The same is true for us. We are now able to publish the information efficiently and instantly to our participants. We are also confident that the content of information is what the issuers are submitting, which makes it more credible and valuable to our clients.
Users of the bank's technology spend less time validating and sanitising corporate actions data, so the system can process it more quickly. This not only enables them to cut costs to processes like the scrubbing of data, it also helps to eliminate the risk of making a mistake in the first place. The work that Codel are doing will also serve to accelerate these processes, guarantee real-time changes through to the endpoint, and result in instruction deadlines being met more comfortably. This in turn results in speedier distribution of entitlements, which makes everyone's end clients happier.
To the question, who will be benefiting from solving the problem, the answer is quite simple. Everybody. Issuers, investors, providers. Issuers, for them, the process will become cost efficient. The same for the providers. And for the investors, they will also benefit from this new transparency, which will allow them to take wise decisions for the investment, and it will improve the general atmosphere on the market. So the market as a whole will benefit from this new project. This I'm certain of.
I think the biggest benefit is for the end investors will have the information quicker and of better quality. Ultimately, the entire chain will benefit, and custodians like BNP Paribas will have less risk. That means we'll free up more capital, which is a benefit for both our clients and our shareholders. overall the entire industry will benefit, because if the process is not as manual as it is, there will be less mistake, less risk, less time wasted along the chain. And ultimately, on one side, the final investor will be able to exercise their rights quicker, and on the other, the issuer will be able to get the capital or to carry out the reorganization quicker without any incident along the way.
Yes, asset managers and even investors benefit too, so everybody gains. Let's not wait any longer to put this right. Help us to fix this problem now.